What would happen if I took a chance? It's always hard at first glance. I don't wanna, but I know I gotta do it. The truth is hard to swallow. I think I'll chew it.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFour. Welcome to Taught, the podcast.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness.
Hey, everybody. So, a couple of months ago, I was perusing my LinkedIn and I came across a comment. The comment was on a post giving advice on how to get a job. And this comment pointed out that there were candidates that had plenty to offer, but ageism makes continuing to be viable in the workforce challenging. This really resonated with me. I'm very aware of my own age lately for a variety of reasons. And sadly, I have in the last year lost some really amazing people who are in my age bracket. One of those people was my cooperating teacher from when I was beginning my education career. And she was a bit older than me, but certainly too young to be passing. She retired after my first year of teaching and then went on to work as an academic coach for, I don't know, probably around 3 years. And then she felt she was ready to spend more time with her family and to be done. No subbing, just done. She was amazing. And we all were pretty sad that she was taking her wisdom and expertise from us that were still in the school system. But what about the people like the commentator, by the way, was also an educator that I saw on LinkedIn? There are many skilled, vibrant, experienced educators that are ready to leave the brick and mortar realm of education, but this doesn't mean that they're done. They are ready to transition and take their expertise in new directions. Today's guest is here to share his story of how he is attempting to navigate this battleground and raise awareness on how ageism is keeping very skilled and talented educators out of the workforce. And you can look at most organizations and see this is what they need right now. They need skilled and talented people. Please welcome Tim, also known as the LinkedIn commentator. And here's what I found out about Tim after reading his comment. Tim has been teaching since he was 10. That's right, you heard it. His mom had a daycare center in their home, and he was her best helper every day after school. Later, at the age of 15, he would take all those foundational teaching skills and become a swimming teacher. When it was time to go to university, he knew he had to pursue an education degree. He has an education specialist degree and is a Gerstacker Fellow. Did I pronounce that right, Tim?
You
Gerstacker?
did, yeah, Gerstacker, yes.
Tim also started 2 schools in China. He has been a teacher, a coach, a principal, and a director throughout his career. And honestly, I am sure I have missed a few things. What the heck, Tim? I'm ready to hire you. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, and that's quite an introduction. Yeah, I've had kind of a long career starting at age of 10, but I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited to be here and talking with you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
It is my pleasure. Exactly how long were you in education?
Like I said, I really consider my time with the kids, right? Like when I was 10, and needless to say, I'm 59 now. So those are a few years.
Yeah, it's the more than the majority of your life, right? So,
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes.
so as you know, this podcast is about burnout,
Hmm.
and I like to hear burnout stories because there are so many of us that can relate to them. Can you share some bits of your burnout story with us?
Yeah, my burnout story is something that many of us in education can relate to, right? Whether you're teaching in elementary school or working in higher ed, or the other thing that I think many people miss are the administrators. If you're an administrator, wow, I really felt like I was in the middle, right? I was trying to balance all the needs of my students first and foremost. And I think that's really important. But then you have your staff, then you have all the families in your building, but then you have the superintendent, you have central office, and the school boards. So, it's really a challenging position.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
so for me, I then went to China for 6 years, and I had an incredible opportunity to start two schools in China. And so, that was just exhilarating in and of itself, right? As head of school, I started a school in 4 months from renovation time to kids in seats. We had 4 months to get the school ready. So I had to hire all of the staff. I was the second hire. My PA, my personal assistant, we always like to say that she was the boss, but she was the first hire by the company. And then she turned around and with the company hired me. So I was the second hire. And she never let me forget that. So but you just wear so many hats, and part of those hats that people don't realize what they are, especially in the international school community, is marketing.
Mhm.
So I've got extensive marketing experience with that, but also my wife and her sisters and my oldest daughter um, are in marketing. My youngest daughter is in social media. So, I'm in that hub. I'm understanding, what's important in that realm. And then you have admissions and communications, how important communication is. What are you communicating? And all those kinds of things. And even, human resources. So, when you're building something from scratch and renovating multiple buildings and trying to be a salesman, that's part of it because I have to go out and give speeches to all the parents. And I'm trying to do the marketing side of it. So I'm getting involved in the British Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber of Commerce. I'm doing speaking engagements at a variety of events. And of course, I'm doing this in a country that is not my own and in a country where I don't speak the language. Uh, and it was just crazy. Uh, I was working around the clock. I literally would have 3 a.m., 4 a.m. calls with teachers trying to hire teachers because they were here in the States. And
Right.
so, the best time to call them is 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's 3 or 4 o'clock in China. And so, you do what needs to be done. I have never in my life worked so hard, and I've never worked so long. And I got to tell you, it was the most rewarding experience I ever had. So then I come back to the US, right? And so I'm all fired up. I'm all excited that I returned to the US. I have this now wealth of experience. I have been working with government agencies at policy. I have been, being a salesman. I have all of these kinds of skills now that your maybe normal public school administrator may have some, or maybe not to the extent that I had. So I was really excited to get back here to the U.S. and get back into the educational system. And my wife sat me down and asked, "Is this really what you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I think so." And I started looking into it, and the superintendents in public school systems, their life expectancy in that position now is less than 2 years because there's such turnover and changes that are happening in school boards and with parents and some of the societal issues that are happening, school safety, school shootings. Um, I have to say, I really didn't even give that a thought when I was overseas. And just because I was teaching in China, you're in Portugal and you travel everywhere near you, right? And I traveled all over the place. I joked I've actually been to more countries than I have states. So, my kids as well. I have three kids, and they all speak multiple languages, and it's just kind of crazy. I struggle with English, but so it is just fascinating to realize that we're one of the few places on Earth that our kids can be shot with a weapon in their school by another student that they know.
Yeah.
That just amazes me. So with that, I was like, maybe I should rethink this. So, I really did start thinking about transitioning out of education. I did have a couple interviews, which I found really intriguing. We talked about ageism, and I think, I was a finalist in a couple of them, and I learned later as I do a research, uh, I learned later that both of those positions have been filled by a first time new principal or new person in the role. And I have to say, I don't know how old they are. They look much younger than me. And so I found that really curious that I have this wealth of experience and all those kinds of things. And during the interview, people were always really intrigued about this, that, and the other thing. And I think it came down to, ageism and are we going to be able to pay him, um, versus, somebody younger who's a little bit cheaper. So with all of that said, though, I want to make it clear that despite all the challenges that the American education system has and the polarization that's happening in our country right now, I still believe that the US has one of the greatest educational systems in the world. We strive to equip every student with essential skills for success. And I have to say that is not something that happens all over the world. And I think we are exceptional in doing that.
You're absolutely right. I feel like that idea itself is very true. I mean, the expectations and the rigor for educators, and so that's all of us, whether
Yeah.
it's your para educators, your teachers,
Yeah.
your administrators, your superintendents, those expectations are extremely high. The education that we have to get, even our paraeducators are now being required to take college courses,
Right.
continuing education courses, or to
Hmm.
pass equivalent tests in order to have those positions. We have some rigorous standards that the rest of the world does not have. I think that the issues that we are having, well, I have said for years that every classroom is a microcosm of the society that it's in. And
Yes,
as a result, the issues that we are having in education, they're societal.
absolutely. Yeah.
And the system is reflecting that. So some of the choices we're making systemically, I think, are taking us down some paths that we should not be going because they're taking us down paths that create responsibilities for educators that are not educator responsibilities. They are other members of society's responsibility. So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents, but I agree. I agree with what you're saying there. Um, so it does.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because in making this decision to kind of step away and move into the more business sector, um, I have to say that my passion for making positive impact has not diminished. Even though I'm 59, and I will clearly, I'm not shy about being 59. I am able to, and I am willing to work super hard. And some of it is generational, right? And so, when I'm looking to, pivot into the corporate space, these are the kinds of things that I think are important. But you're so right when you're talking about societal issues. And I have some thoughts, and I think we'll probably get into this later. I have some thoughts, of course, on what's driving some of these changes and where we currently are. And I have to say, there's hope.
I'm glad to hear that. I think that's one of the things that's happened for me doing this podcast is that I'm getting a little hopeful. So this is a system that I don't necessarily, and I'm 54, so I'm not planning on leaving Portugal. I mean, I'm getting a little late in life to be making too many more drastic worldwide moves.
Right.
Um, but I don't plan on being in the US education system as an educator again. Having
Hmm.
said that, it makes me want to continue to be an advocate. Some of the things that I'm hearing on the podcast, both ways, right? Some things that are
Sure.
so nice that are happening, but also some positive. I mean, we have some go-getters out there that are saying, this is worth saving. And we're going to, and I say that, we're going to take back teaching. This is our realm. It was never anybody else's realm. It is the educator's realm, and we know what we're doing. But we've had some things taken away from us, and I see people kind of gathering the troops and saying we're taking some of this back, and it's working. So I'm hopeful too. I'm hopeful too, Tim.
I'm glad to hear you say that because that is kind of what ultimately has led me to um, decide to maybe get out of education because you know it's difficult. It is a deeply personal and it's deeply troubling decision to make. But I really felt that I was not having and I would not have as great an impact as I once did. And I've been facing some of the same hurdles and obstacles for 20 years. And so I'm really excited to hear you say that, oh, some people are gathering the troops because, God, it would not take much to get me back in, right? Even though I've decided that I'm kind of stepping out, but if I see things were turning around, I definitely could get back in the fight.
That's good to know because I think that it does take some skilled people getting back in there too. So it seems like maybe you weren't really driven out of education from burnout. It actually sounds like you had your love and passion rekindled in starting those schools, but it was kind of that idea of in education, for those that don't know, we oftentimes have a really wonky pay system. It is not a merit-based pay system. It is years of cumulative experience combined with educational experience. in most districts. As a matter of fact, I've
Yes.
never heard of one that it doesn't use some formula of that,
Right.
which makes those of us that are of a certain age, Tim, we are very expensive. But
Yeah, absolutely.
um we're worth it, you know? I mean, we are not just bringing our knowledge to the table, we are bringing those years of expertise. But districts are not wanting to pay for it. And it sounds to
No.
me, I just want to reiterate what think I heard you say, that that was really the thing that drove you away, was the
Mm.
lack of respect that goes along with that thinking, as well as the knowing that you're going to have to fight twice as hard for a position that you're probably overqualified for. Was Seems like maybe that burnt you out.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very, very concise and right to the point. You said it much better than I did. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I'm not putting words in your mouth.
No,
So,
not at all. I thank you for that.
do you feel that there is a connection between the lack of respect for the education system as a whole and how challenging education entrepreneurs are finding it to break into new areas? I mean, educators tend to have a really well-rounded set of skills that are very needed, arguably. I'm just
Hmm.
thinking, if I had experience and expertise in many other areas, I think I personally would be more marketable. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's. I've been actually thinking about this a lot. And because I have a different perspective, right, from being overseas and traveling to as many schools as I have, and my son was a Davis scholar. He went to boarding school and high school in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and my oldest daughter, was 2 years in Rome, and my youngest daughter graduated from Beijing City International School, and they all speak multiple languages, right? And so I have a little different perspective, maybe than some people do. Um, but I absolutely think that you were right there with that connection, and I think it stems from even a broader societal issue, which, if you will, allow me, I will kind of get on my soapbox here, because this is something that I have been really passionate about for years, and and I think it really speaks to the heart of where we are with educator respect. In other countries, you just simply don't see this, and I think educators are those people that have these well-rounded set of skills, that they're managing groups of kids all day long. They adapt on the fly, right? And they're communicating these complex ideas in very simple language. They solve problems creatively. Like, these are all things that industry would love, but I think this stemmed from a group of people years ago that misinterpreted some international rankings on the Tims and the PISA report. Are you familiar with the Tims and the
Yeah,
PISA
yeah, I
reports?
am.
Okay, I thought you would be, and
But
and so
you go ahead for our listeners and break those down a little bit, because not everyone may be.
and that I was just going to do that. The Tims is the Trends in International Mathematics in Science Study, right? And the PISA is Program for International Student Assessment. And so basically, they give kids tests, like in fourth and eighth grade, and or at age 15, and things like that. And then they rank all of the countries based on those scores that the kids get. Sounds very logical. But years ago, some people saw this and were shocked. They couldn't believe that the United States was not number one. How could this happen? And that started it, right? That started the idea that, oh, what's wrong with our public school system? What are we doing?
Well, and if I
And
may, Tim, I think that
please.
It was a combination of that and how much per capita we spend per student in the US compared with other countries. So I think those 2
Sure.
things combined. I'm right there with you though. Keep going. Preach it.
Y- Yeah. So, when they started looking at these results, um, they were showing, some countries, especially our competitors, right? Like Russia and China and things like that. And they really failed to consider how the data was collected, right? The US is one of the few countries, and I tried to research this, and it's very fuzzy who does and who doesn't. But it wouldn't be fair to say that the US is the only country. I think it's one of the few countries that requires all of our students, including special ed students, to participate in these assessments. So, what that means is China. People may not realize this, but China, they have so many the number game for China is this: 1%. Their top 1% of their students, the kids that score, at the extreme level, the top 1% of their students outnumber all of the students that we have in our educational system today.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell you this: China, like many, many things that happen in China, and God knows I love the country for a lot of reasons, but it has its flaws like any other country, like we do too. And with China in particular, they do many things um, for surface value. So when things come out like the Tims or the PISA report, you can bet your bottom dollar that they are going to score number one, and they are going to be above the US for sure. And I can tell you exactly how that happens. The PISA and the TIMS are only given to selected students.
Yeah.
And those are the very best and brightest students. So we're not comparing apples to apples here. And, when I tell people this, they're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, we're educating all of our kids. There's many countries in the world that don't educate all their kids. If you're a special needs child, you may never go to school, or you may go to school at a very low level. Or they may put you in what they call vocation schools, which do not have nearly the resources that the quote unquote regular school would have. And so there are many countries that do that. And so it's when you're looking at these Tims and PISA reports, you have to look at the information in more of a collective kind of thing as well. And so I think that with this interpretation of we're not doing well, that started the negativity. And you're going to hear me say a lot about negativity. Um, it started the negativity in that the education system in the US is on the downside.
Mhm.
And I think that was in an effort for some people to use this to push changes in the curriculum. And I think they wanted to really gain control over the curriculum for what their children were being taught. And they were wrapping themselves in this, how can we be this low in the international rankings? We spend all of this money on our kids and we're getting nothing for it. There's professional athletes that can't read at a third grade level and all these kinds of things, right? And my pushback to that is, remember our mandate. Public education is here for a free public education to the masses that provides basic academic skills, living a healthy lifestyle and preparing our kids to be positive citizens in our community, in our state, in our country, and globally. So, to me, we have forgotten what that really means. And, there was this era of all kids need to go to college. All kids need to go to college, right? And so I really think that during that time, there was also the vilification of educators, right? So now educators were being blamed. And by the way, I want to take 2 seconds to give you kudos for saying educators. Many times people talk about education community and the only word out of their mouth are teachers. But, there's so much beyond the teacher, right? There is the teacher in the classroom. There are the administrators. There are the support staff that, you ask any teacher and they will, sing the praises of much of their support staff. So many things they couldn't do without their support staff. So I really commend you for using the term educators, because I think that's really key is all of these people are educators, and they've been vilified. They were called lazy. They're unappreciative of only working in the summers. People have called them glorified babysitters, and it reached a point, I think, where it has become a societal norm. And in a
Or
societal
educator
norm,
bashing, yeah.
yeah. And so in a societal norm, when you translate that to the corporate world, now the corporate world has these views of educators who are trying to transition into their space. Would I want to hire someone who's lazy, who, just wants all their summers off and, it's just a glorified babysitter, and then they get paid way too much for not working as many hours? All of that. And I think, again, the negativity has outweighed what is really happening in the school system. And so, again, and I want to say this, despite all this negativity, I still firmly believe that the US is one of the best educational systems in the world. We
Well,
educate all of our kids.
I'm really glad you brought up some excellent points there. And as you were going through talking about those rankings, the quote, and I don't know who said the quote, but there's a quote that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that that sounds like a lot of what we have going on here is that when we compare ourselves to other countries, it's very hard for us to see our progress. And this is certainly not something that we teach in the classroom in any capacity, right? There's nobody out there
Hmm.
saying, "Oh, compare yourself to everybody else in here, now feel bad about it because you're not number
Right.
one." Except for you, you are number one, so you get to feel good, but everybody else has to feel bad. And the
Exactly.
cultural component that you mentioned, I think, is just off the charts important if we're going to have these scores. Because, for example, in the country I live in, Portugal, um, we have a lot of respect for educators. In fact, we have a lot of respect because they are given a lot of autonomy to do what they want to do within the classroom. As far as parents supporting that, they're a collectivist society. They recognize that an education is important to their children.
Hmm.
Having said that, they do not get a lot of respect in the pay category. They get
Right.
moved all over the country. They get transferred every so often. It doesn't matter where they live, where their spouse
Yeah.
is working at. I mean, there are other things that are not respect,
Sure.
but those reflect that Portugal's unique cultural norms. Their schools are also set up with that funnel system that you talked about. Okay, you smart ones that are good at math, you get to go to this school for high school. You
Right.
artistic ones, you get to go to this school for high school. Oh, you guys that don't know what you're doing and haven't figured it out yet, you should have by 14. Sorry about that. You got to go over here now. And again, that reflects the culture. It doesn't mean that we need to take our US norms and say, oh, this will work better here. Um,
Right.
so
Oh,
when we
absolutely.
compare, I mean, we wouldn't compare our system to the Portuguese system or
No.
the Chinese system. We believe in
No.
equity. We believe that every student does deserve the opportunities to be in the same classroom and learning the same content. And that's the other thing you said that really struck me as we are looking at what a right to a free education is. It is a right and it is an opportunity. And if
Yes.
someone or a family chooses not to take that opportunity and do with it what they can, there is no educator on the face of this planet that can change that. So,
Right.
as we are a lot of times in privileged countries like now I'm on my soapbox. Um, in a lot of countries where there is as much privilege, and there's only one, United States, but some get close to it, the value of what you're getting doesn't seem to be that large. And
Yeah.
it's because we have so much privilege.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, think about it. We're teaching our kids in the public school system. We talk about our basic skill set, right? Our basic skill set, our standard, our bar for that is above most countries around the world for what we're teaching. We're teaching problem solving. We're teaching higher order thinking skills. And that is really why it amazes me when people want to bash the US education. That Do they not realize that people from all over the world are begging and pleading and trying so hard to find ways to come to the US for education purposes?
Yes.
And there's now a trend in the Far East, and I think it's been happening for several years now. In many universities, you had students from, the Far East, uh, Southeast Asia as well, but India is in a big way coming for university, and you would have a few kids who might come for high school, depending on what the circumstances were. There's a new trend now where wealthy parents in Southeast Asia are looking to bring their kids to elementary schools, boarding elementary schools in the US so that they can have the education that they're not getting in their home country. And I can speak to this because I've counseled several parents and I actually worked with several schools on the East Coast that are boarding schools, and did some preliminary interviews and those kinds of things. So this is something that's starting in elementary school. So I find it hard, when people really want to say how horrible this education system is, and yet there's so many people around the world that want to come here. It's just like, it's the comical thing that you hear. People bash all the teachers and how horrible school is, this and anything. But what do you hear at the end of the summer? Oh my God, I can't wait for these kids to go back to school. I don't know how the teachers do it. They have 30 kids in classes. I don't know how they do it because my kids were driving up the wall.
Yep. Said
you
it
know,
myself. Said it myself.
so absolutely. But here's a glimmer of hope. I'm big on hope, right? So in all my networking conversations that I have with people and interviews that I've had with CEOs and business leaders, um, I find it ironic that those that have hired educators absolutely rave about them. They talk about their work ethic. They talk about their professionalism, talent, and they talk about their adaptability and organizational skills. Like, so maybe that word is going to start spreading, and they're going to start, recognizing the fact that educators are really talented people in no matter what they do. But I wanted to share that, and I wanted to give you a little glimmer of hope, because I think that when we do a better job of recognizing and valuing the incredible skills that educators bring to the table, whether it's in the classroom or the boardroom, I think that's when the U.S. succeeds.
And I think that there's something to be said with more outside agencies recognizing what teachers bring to the table. And
Yeah,
maybe within education, the infrastructure itself, there will be more respect for what we actually have in these people as well, because we are in this really bizarre time right now where we seem to have people that are being hired and then don't really have the skill set that they need to do the jobs. And
yeah.
interestingly enough, to again piggyback on your comment here, one of my podcast guests who had been on several different podcasts, so I was very intimidated to interview her the first time. So I had her on, and at the end, it stopped recording, and I said, "Okay, can you give me some feedback? I'm always open to feedback." And
Sure.
she said, "I'm going to tell you, you are not the first former teacher that has had me on. She had had 3 or 4 former teachers
Hmm.
doing a variety of different kinds of podcasts. They weren't all about burnout, but she said, I love it when I find out a host is a former teacher because everything is very organized. I have all the information I need well in advance. I
Right.
know they're very prepared, they're timely. And she said, it's, if I find out that somebody else and they're a teacher, she said, it's almost like a whew, I don't even have to worry about this one. And I was very flattered by that. So to your point is very true. So
Well,
what do you
I have to laugh, right? Like, you and I both, we agreed on 7 o'clock tonight, right? What the, like, we both on at quarter two. Like, when I got on, I was not expecting to see you at all. I was expecting to just make sure the camera was working, this, that, and the other thing. And there you were. I was kind of laughing. I was like, well, two educators, because
Yeah.
if you're 10 minutes early, you're late,
I don't know about you, Tim. I was that person that was getting there in the morning with the custodian.
Absolutely.
I get all my work done. Then I have my gossip time and my time with my other teachers at the end of the day, So
Sure. Yeah,
I got to get my
absolutely.
stuff done at the beginning. Yeah.
Right, right.
So you talked
Absolutely.
about hope. What is your hope for your own future? Or
You
maybe
know,
maybe you've
um,
gotten something since the last time we talked. I don't know.
I have a job that I took because I need a job.
Yeah.
Is it ideal? No. But could it be maybe? Yeah, they're like, it's promised. I'm an inventory control analyst in a warehouse. I'm the
Hmm.
very first one they've ever had. And I've been there for 2 weeks. And so I'm learning the ropes and this, that, the other thing. I think that there is potential, but it's kind of small and those kinds of things. But ultimately, for me, when I think of my future, I get really excited because I'm looking for a position where I can have a real positive impact, right? And in this position that I have currently, as being the first and only, I'm going to have some impact. So, I like that. But I want to use my passion and drive to take things from where they are now to make them better. And again, I'm going to be able to do that here at the first, but I'm thinking about organizations. I'm thinking about bigger organizations, having a bigger impact and those kinds of things. So, when I think about and I talk about working in the ed adjacent space. Ed tech is definitely part of that. But at the same time, I took this job because I'm open to many. You don't know where the opportunity is going to take you, and you don't know what is going to just be that fit. Somebody could come along in a totally weird, industry for me, that wants, to do some organizational change their thinking, and those are things that I get excited about, right? And uh I have proven that I'm willing to jump in with both feet, make things happen, even in a foreign country where I don't speak the language. That was a bit of a leap of faith, So I see myself taking on a leadership role, where I can use my knowledge, skills, and understanding, and really, I think if I had to boil things down, it would be onboarding to help organizations really reflect and consider changes. Um, but all of this is really to set them apart from their competitors, right? And when you're making changes, there are companies that are going to go very slow and make very incremental changes. And I'm the kind of person who is like, if we're going to make a change, let's make a fundamental change. Let's look at something that where we can do it just a little better, right? And if we make these, you know, just a little better here and a little better there, and we do this over time, we're outpacing our competitors. And so, when you're living that vision and mission every day and you're able to implement it, and it's all about how we think, how we act, how we interact within our community and within the world. I think that's a great place to be. Now, I'm not so naive to think that, people listening to this are going to be like, oh, that sounds, a bit lofty or pie in the sky. But to me anyway, I look at the possibilities, right? If you achieve only a fraction of that change, you're still miles ahead of those organizations that are just making the calculated incremental change, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I want to be. I want to be in it. I want to be in the thick of it. I want to be thinking about things that people say we can't be done. I want to be doing things that people say won't happen. And I want to implement positive changes for people and organizations that they belong to. Because my goal is to set ourselves apart by doing the little things just a little better, with a little more clarity, and with a little more conviction. And it's about driving not only you further, but it's about driving your organization and driving the industry forward bit by bit, year after year. And I think if you do that, you're going to I think you're going to be terribly successful. And I have to say, some of the changes that organizations need to make, in my conversations with CEOs, and I did a small consulting gig, are actually really simple, soft skills kinds of things that, once they're implemented and once they're really starting to be done with fidelity, make monumental changes in your organization and your productivity and your P&L, continue to go in the positive direction. So for me, I get excited about what's coming up, and I'm, still looking for that place, but I think that I'm going to land somewhere that I'm going to be able to make a positive impact across the entire organization, and hopefully an industry. And yeah, I'm 59, but I still got a lot of fight and drive in me to make that happen.
And a lot of experience to make it happen.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
So I think you're probably going to take the corporate world by storm soon. And I'll tell you why. So I have a few friends in those areas too. And I know that there is a current model that I am hearing over and over again, that's coming out in the business world. Actually, it's been there for a while, but it's one where we talk out of both sides of our mouth. On one side, we're saying we are wanting this connected relationship with everybody at every level. And
Right.
out of the other side of our mouth, we're saying, here's the top, do as you're told down here. And
Yes.
even when down here gives feedback, it's no, we're making the decision, even though they're saying, oh, thank you for your feedback. We'll look into that. So I think that there's a lot of this is adding to this kind of global thing where people are like, maybe I just won't work, or maybe I'll show up and I'll sit in that chair and you can pay me and I will do the minimum required. And
Absolutely.
this is creating some pretty big issues, I think. So
Absolutely.
your time is here, friend. You got to get in there and start getting them going.
I wish I knew.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez.
But I'm so frustrated.
If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, tot.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaru said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Tot, the podcast.
Play our roles and ignore the problems. I wish I knew.